Hello YouTube, my name is Tristan Ripley and welcome back to my channel. Now today is a very special video. I'm super excited for this. I'm going to be going over a list that I made on Album of the Year about 4 years ago, back in 2020. And then I updated it in 2021, but I haven't touched it in over 3 years. So this is a list that is called Tristan Core. I'm not proud of that name, but that was a popular kind of list idea back then. Essential albums which I have listened to that have made up my musical taste and musical understanding, listed in chronological order of when I heard them, only including major albums. P.S. Listen with caution. If you listen to each of these albums in the same order as I did, you will become me. Don't say I didn't warn you. So, little cheeky joke at the end there. But basically, this is a list of major albums that I heard in my life that influenced my taste and my own music up until this point, which was 3 years ago. So we're starting with Approaching Nirvana, Lapse in Time. The first album I ever listened to, and the only album I ever listened to until I got into music. Originally heard in 2012. Discovered it because of a Minecraft YouTuber named ThinkNoodles. He used songs from this album in most of his videos. It's a fairly basic electronic album, but it also contains some experimental and interesting elements. Overall, an enjoyable experience. One which I still come back to once in a while, mainly just for nostalgia though. This description is actually still completely accurate. I still come back to this album every once in a while, select songs from it just because I find them very interesting and nostalgic. Very, very nostalgic for me. I was a big fan. I don't know if anybody who's watching this knows who ThinkNoodles is, but I was a huge fan of him back in like 2013, so, you know, a decade ago. Moving on to the second, Cage the Elephant's Melophobia. Ah yes, Melonphobia. This was probably the first real album that I ever listened to. I don't know what I meant by that. And I guess and actually took the time to gather thoughts on. I guess that's what I was talking about. Cage the Elephant was the first band I ever got into, and I'm very grateful for this. I think it was a fairly decent place to start and quickly evolved into something much larger. I still agree with this description as well. Cage the Elephant was a good place to start. It was really like the first band that I got into. It was also the first band that I ever saw live, I guess. I don't know if I feel like at this point I had already, yeah, because I saw them live back in 2019, so I'm surprised that I didn't mention it here. But yeah, they were the first band that I ever saw live. Moving on to the third, we've got MGMT. I'm surprised that it took this long to get to them. MGMT, Oracular Spectacular. After listening to a ton of Cage the Elephant, the discovery of MGMT was something which changed my life. MGMT quickly became my favorite band. I absolutely loved the 3 major singles, Kids, Time to Pretend, and Electric Feel. I listened to these constantly and then eventually decided to check out the entire album. Listening to this record changed my entire view of music. It allowed me to appreciate it more than ever before. It sounds a little silly, but it is true that this had a huge influence on me, this Oracular Spectacular record. It is a great, great record. It is fantastic, and I think it's very underrated. I think it's just as good, if not better, than Little Dark Age, which I know is a hot take, but Radiohead's OK Computer. Here we go. After starting to get more into music, I decided I would look up the highest rated album of all time. I remember this exact moment. I was in the, maybe I'm gonna, oh wait. The description of this actually explains it exactly how I was just about to explain it. That's funny. Okay, well, I remember this specifically. I was in the car with my parents on my phone. I looked it up and asked them if they had ever heard of Radiohead. They said no. I sort of dismissed this album at first, as I had never heard of it beforehand, but after a while I gave it a shot. Suppose this record marks a spot where music began to take a different form in my mind, one that was much larger than before. I'm surprised I didn't expand more on that, but basically what I meant was like, OK Computer changed my view about how albums really existed. It basically just it influenced my opinion on how important albums are. Like the collection of songs and deciding the order and everything and the structure of albums. It sort of brought all that into my head, sort of these ideas that I hadn't thought of before. And so it was kind of an important moment for me back then. Then we've got MGMT's Little Dark Age. MGMT and Radiohead became my favorite bands in a matter of months. In fact, all this time later, I still greatly enjoy most of their music. Still true. I began running through both of their discographies, as you will see in this list. Next is Radiohead's In Rainbows, my favorite album of all time. That is incredibly, that is not correct now. Those who know me know how different my taste is from how it used to be 4 years ago. But yeah, that is not even remotely close. Although I still do enjoy In Rainbows, it is not even remotely close to my favorite album of all time. But it is still enjoyable. At first, it was actually one of my least favorite Radiohead albums. I was more into the rock styles of OK Computer and The Bends. The discovery of this album was once again life-changing. It has remained my favorite album ever since I really started getting into it, which has been a very long time. I view every song on this record as being perfect. Perfect vocals, instrumentation, lyricism, etc. I don't see it getting better than this. If I ever find an album I enjoy more than In Rainbows, it will be a monumental moment. That day has yet to come. And very quickly after I made this list, I found Good Morning, Good Night, which overcame In Rainbows. And then from there I discovered many, many more, and In Rainbows fell and fell and fell, and you know. I don't know where it is now. It's probably still in my top 1,000, but it's, you know. MGMT, congratulations. MGMT's best album. Disagree, fight me. I still agree with that very strongly, especially with the release of their new album. I don't think it even comes close to Congratulations. Congratulations is amazing. Next we've got King Cruel's Man Alive. Up until this point, I had been posting my reviews on Instagram. Then I found a YouTube channel called Brad Taste in Music. Bradley introduced me to this website, and he is the reason why I have gained such a following. Man Alive was the first record which I ever reviewed on Album of the Year, and is also the record I chose to review for my 1,000 follower special. It is a pretty damn fantastic record, hosting some of Cruel's best performances. From this point forward, my view of music changed drastically yet again. I started looking into music from the eyes of a reviewer, and not just the eyes of a casual listener. I would say that's true, yeah. Once I got onto Album of the Year and I started reading how other people reviewed music, it really changed my view of music. Like, it completely changed the way that I listened to it and the way that I reviewed it and everything. It made me realize that the stuff that I was releasing on Instagram was unbelievably amateur. Ween, The Mollusk. Here it is, the most important album of this entire list. Ween, The Mollusk. You know what? I still will probably agree with that. In terms of this list, not in terms of the most important album I've ever heard, but in terms of what's going to be on this list, I think that Ween the Mollusk is actually still going to be the most important. And I'll get into why in a second. Without this record, I would not be here today. The Mollusk changed my entire life, not just in the music world. Up until the point of listening to this album, I had never been captivated by music. Sure, I had listened to a lot of albums that I loved and enjoyed, but I had never been fully immersed. This album changed everything for me. I was completely sucked into the realm that is this album, and I believe I may still be inside there. One of my favorite albums of all time, and the reason why I have become so invested and interested in music. Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, so basically, I should have gone into more detail, but I was playing, I'm going to tell the actual story here. I was playing Minecraft, of all things, and I decided to listen to this album, Ween the Mollusk, an album I hadn't heard before. And while playing Minecraft and listening to this album, I had just the strongest musical experience I had ever had up until that point. For some reason, the mixture of Minecraft and the Mollusk was perfection to me. But it wasn't really about Minecraft, it was all about the music, and eventually I actually just had to stop playing Minecraft because I got so enveloped in the music that I couldn't focus on Minecraft anymore. But basically I just had such an investing experience in this album, it just changed the way that I viewed music forever. Wolfgang Amadeus Phoenix by Phoenix. Wolfgang Amadeus Phoenix is one of the best indie rock pop albums of all time. Although it didn't necessarily introduce me to anything new, I consider this to be a very important record nonetheless. It's remained one of my favorites. Also, it was among the first that I ever reviewed. It was also one of the first records that I ever got on vinyl when I first started my vinyl collection. Good record. I actually reviewed it, I think, on here, right? I did a review of this record back in season 0, and I still do enjoy it, so. Panchico Death Metal. Death Metal was the first album of 2020 which really clicked with me, setting it high above all else. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this was actually... Oh, I'm going to talk about it. Why does that keep happening? Every time I'm about to mention something, I read ahead, and it's the exact thing that I wrote in here. So, in fact, for a while I had this as a 100. I was just about to mention that for a bit I actually had this at a perfect score. I'd like to give myself a bit of credit for introducing AOTY to this record, as my review really launched the record into success on Album of the Year. Let me make this clear, on Album of the Year. Obviously this record got popular for way different reasons. I just like to think I'm one of the people who brought that over here. Maybe not. What am I even talking about anymore? Anyways, this is a great album. Yeah, my review did do numbers on this album. Back then, like, big numbers, not really compared to how many numbers reviews do now. The website has really changed since I used to review, but that was a big moment. Radiohead Amnesiac. I used to consider this Radiohead's best album. I now consider it their second best, criminally underrated. Well, funny enough, I actually consider this their best record now. This, apparently, I don't even remember this being my best record, or my favorite Radiohead record for a bit. Actually, I vaguely do when I wrote my review for it. I think it was my favorite at that time, but then it quickly switched back to In Rainbows, but then it switched back to Amnesiac, and it's been Amnesiac for quite a few years now. Lol, what the fuck is a Merzbow? Transcends. Pulse Demon is the record which introduced me to harsh noise, a genre which would become very important to me in the near future. Yeah, so this was the album that introduced me to harsh noise, and that is actually like some of the first music that I ever made was harsh noise music, and it really, really influenced me. Merzbow's music in general has really influenced a lot of my noise-related work still to this day. Avenade, It's a Whimsical Afterlife. It's a Whimsical Afterlife was definitely the first Album of the Year community project I ever fell in love with. To this day, I still believe it to be the best Album of the Year community record ever created, and I doubt anything will top it anytime soon. Avenade is a wonderful person and a fantastic musician. This record will always stand as both an inspiration and a masterpiece. Although my taste has grown off, like, completely this style of music, I still enjoy this record quite a bit, and I would still consider it to be the best Album of the Year like user project by far. I don't think I've ever heard one that sounds so cohesive and just has so many songs that I actually want to return to. Next, we've got Against All Logics, 2017 to 2019. Those who followed me closely during 2020 will understand why this record is here. I don't think I've ever changed my rating as much for a record as I have with this. First it was around an 80, then a 90, then it was one of my only 100s, then it went to a 99, then back to a 90, now it rests at an 85. There's probably more than that as well. I think it's part of me attempting to deny how much I love this record. I may have to keep updating my rating at some point because I believe this to be almost on par with Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92. I'm not sure why, but hey, it's my opinion. When I don't still believe that this is on par with Selected Ambient Works 85-92, I believe that Saw is better. 2017 to 2019 is fantastic, and I still think it's a criminally underrated record. I think it's so great. Spirit They're Gone, Spirit They've Vanished. Discovering this record was pretty important to me. It would essentially kickstart a large discovery path I would take revolving largely around Mew beloved albums. Most of these albums I heard I've yet to rate, such as this one. It really is a fantastic and unique album, possibly Animal Collective's best. I still believe it to be Animal Collective's best, actually. Really, really unique, great record there. Portishead's Dummy. Portishead marks my introduction to trip-hop, a genre I would quickly fall in love with and become one of my all-time favorites. This also happens to be my favorite record from the genre. Dummy might still be my favorite trip-hop record. I actually haven't explored trip-hop all that much, nearly as much as I would have liked to back then probably, but I just started getting interested in other music after that, and other stuff took off. Ween, Quebec. This album essentially represents my triumphant return to Ween. I had previously only really dug into the Mollusk, but around this time I began investing much more into their work. I even got a cameo from Dean Ween for Christmas. That's true. I got a cameo a long time ago from Dean Ween for Christmas, which was such a fantastic Christmas present. It was really interesting to hear from him. Have a Nice Life, Death Consciousness. Death Consciousness is one of my favorite records of all time. It's both depressing and understanding. It's both oddly warm and cold. It's just as much lively as it is dead. One day I hope to gather the courage to give this record the review and rating it deserves, but as this and a few other records on this list, I haven't gotten to that point yet. Well, Death Consciousness is still a record I really enjoy, but once again, as most of these albums have on this list, this has greatly grown off of me as my taste has just changed drastically over the last 4 years. But it is still a great record that I do enjoy. And on to Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92. One could argue this potentially being the most important album in this list for me. Actually, you know what? It's either this or The Mollusk, definitely. It's a tough one to choose, but this one, and I'm sure I'm about to talk about it, but this is basically what got me into making my own music. Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92 is, in my opinion, the best electronic album ever made. Its sounds and stylistic choices have both stood and utterly destroyed the test of time. I believe this record to still be futuristic, even almost 3 decades after its release. We may never evolve to a point where we can fully understand this record, and that is okay. It is the definition of a masterpiece, one with many interpretations. Aphex Twin is a legend and by far the largest inspiration towards me. This album is part of the reason why I began making music. Yeah, it's a huge part of the reason why I began making music, so very, very important for me. C418 Excursions, this is one of, if not the best album ever made. Okay, well, I don't still agree with that anymore. I was shocked by the way that I started that off, but I don't agree with that anymore, although I do still really enjoy this, but I've been in the process of writing a review on it for about a month now, but it is tough to make progress when I listen. Words cannot describe how I feel about this album. Expect the review within a month or so. It will include my longest, most complex and detailed thoughts. Yeah, that was an incredibly long review. Those who were there remember it. It was pages and pages and pages. And going back to it, I am a little embarrassed by it just because of how deeply invested I got into it, but it is also kind of nice. I don't really think it stands the test of time, but it is, you know, it's nice to come back to. Kanye West, Yeezus. Yep, I put Yeezus on here. It is actually the first Kanye album I ever fully heard, and I only did so fairly recently. Hold My Liquor is a goddamn masterpiece. I'm not really sure why I put Yeezus on here, to be honest, but it was the first Kanye album I ever fully heard, and it is actually still my favorite Kanye West album to this day, so. And then finally, we've got Ray Lynch's Deep Breakfast. Alright, this list has pretty much caught up to present time. This is more of a future pick than anything, as right now I don't actually believe this record to be all that significant. I do have reason to suspect, however, that it will not only inspire and influence my future musical endeavors, but also provide new ideas in its path. It is a shame this record has only 3 ratings on here. Let me see how many ratings it has now. 17! That is still way too few ratings for this album. This album is really interesting. It really stands the test of time. It's a great electronic record, and I highly, highly recommend it. And yeah, it did end up being somewhat influential for my music. Maybe not as influential as I expected, but it did definitely influence me. Alright, and that is the end of this list, so that's going to do it for this video. Do you guys think I should do a part 2 where I talk about the albums after Deep Breakfast that inspired me? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.